Good morning, everyone. I'm House Republican Conference Chairman Jeff Kiker. Thank you for being here today. I'm also with my House Republican colleagues to talk today where we stand in session and kind of zoom out and talk about the future of our state. While few Republican bills have moved forward, I think we've gotten 10% through the committee process and onto the floor of the total number of bills that are out there. We've had a chance to hone in on what Democrat lawmakers are really prioritizing this year. We have things like legalizing prostitution, reinvigorating Green New Deal ideas, reducing penalties for first-degree murder, banning grocery bags, and the list goes on. Not found in this list is what I hear from my constituents and other Illinois families about what Illinois needs to solve, and that's reducing some of the overburdensome rules, regulation, and bureaucracy that they encounter each and every day as they try to establish their lives here in Illinois. Illinois' most frustrating and stagnant problems are currently being ignored by the Democrat majority. What we haven't seen is a real effort to tackle some of these biggest challenges in our state. Things like IDPFR licensing issues. The problems that we see in our state, agency mismanagement. From DCFS to Secretary of State to HFS, there have been a number of notable missteps that have consistently gone unaccounted for. We're here to ask for that accountability on behalf of the Illinois people, to advocate on behalf of those Illinoisans, and to instill in them the trust in their government that they have been seeking and wanting from those of us that they send down here to Springfield. Our very job as lawmakers is to answer to those constituents and to be their voice and advocate under this dome. Out of that, it also becomes a responsibility to protect our state's most vulnerable citizens, and we continue to ignore that obligation. This includes our workers at DCFS, an issue that is very important to our leader, Tony McCombie, and the families of both Pam Knight and Deidre Silas. The Knight-Silas Act that has been talked about multiple times. Everyone in the legislature should know those two names at this point in time. It is a true shame and failure on the part of this legislature that we have not been able to collectively get a bill that would enhance penalties and protect those DCF workers against harm that they frequently encounter. We passed multiple other penalty enhancements where my Democratic peers across the aisle see fit, yet we continue to deny DCFS workers the protection and the need of being safe as they conduct the work that they do on behalf of the Illinois people. Since the 100th General Assembly, the Democrat majority has leveled 132 penalty enhancements. Governor Pritzker has even supported the Knight-Silas Act, and we believe now is the time to move forward and truly improve the world for DCFS employees. Let us show our respect and have the backs of these frontline workers. With that, I'd like to pass it over to State Representative Patrick Sheehan.
Thank you, Leader Kiker. My name is State Representative Patrick Sheehan. I serve the 37th District, which encompasses Southwest Cook and Southwest Will counties. April is Child Abuse Awareness Month, a time to reflect on the critical importance of protecting our children and ensuring their safety. Unfortunately, the Illinois Department of Children and Family Services, DCFS, has consistently fallen short in fulfilling its mission. DCFS is tasked with one of the most important responsibilities in the world, safeguarding our kids. Yet, the agency's administrative failures have led to devastating consequences that cannot be undone. Since July 2018, DCFS has failed to produce incident-specific reports for over 1,200 child deaths and more than 3,000 serious injuries under the Abused and Neglected Child Reporting Act. That's 4,200 children, sons, daughters, brothers, and sisters who were failed by the system. These lives are lost. futures shattered. And these kind of failings have irreparable consequences. The blame is not on the DCFS frontline workers, but on the agency's management. As a police officer, I've witnessed firsthand the struggles of DCFS frontline workers. Dedicated individuals who are overworked, understaffed, and overwhelmed. These workers are stretched thin, doing everything they can to protect children, but they are often left without the resources or support they need. I've seen cases where signs of abuse or neglect were evident, yet the caseworker, burdened by an unmanageable workload, couldn't complete the report in time. In other instances, the department failed to act altogether, leaving the child in harm's way. That's why I'm proud to have brought forth House Bill 3262. This bill is a straightforward, crucial fix. It would require audio or video recordings of interviews with abused or neglected children. It ensures accuracy, accountability, and prevents critical details from getting lost in paperwork. In 2025, outdated methods should never be the reason a child's cry for help goes unheard. DCFS frontline workers are overloaded, and this bill eases their burden so they can better do their job of protecting the children who need us most. Protecting our children is a moral imperative. We must act now to fix this broken system and ensure no child must deal with the consequences of DCFS's failings. House Bill 3262 is a step in the right direction, but it's only the beginning. Together, we can work to provide DCFS workers with the tools and resources they need to protect our children. We owe our children safety, not excuses. I will not stop fighting until all children under state care are safe and properly taken care of. Thank you, and I turn it over to Representative Charlie Meyer.
Good morning. I'm State Representative Charlie Meyer from the 109th District in Southern Illinois. Since taking office over 13 years ago, I have been passionate about the safety and care of our most vulnerable among us, those with developmental disabilities. The Department of Human Services recently announced that the Federal Department of Justice will be auditing the state-operated developmental centers, specifically Schultz, Shapiro, and Mabley Centers for Abuse and Neglect. As a champion for the rights of those with disabilities to receive safe, quality care, I support this effort. What is lacking in this effort is for safe care is the oversight of community integrated living arrangements, CILAs, frequently called community group homes. We have had a plan to address the lack of safe care and oversight. After many years, you can look at things we fought, DHS, to implement procedures and improve the quality of care for developmentally disabled. Despite the improvements we've made and our success at speeding up the investigation process of abuse on the site, we still have major problems with the investigation stacking up in Springfield due to the bureaucracy while we're still paying our employees to do nothing on their jobs. CILA's and SODC's employees need to be responsible for their actions. If they're covering up abuse, these workers need to report the abuse and neglect that they witness. I have filed legislation making them responsible if they do not report abuse that they are willingly seeing firsthand. These group homes do not have that oversight necessary to keep individuals safe from harm. The SODCs have the oversight of the Illinois Department of Public Health, as well as frequent visits from Equip for Equality and ARC. Equip for Equality targets SODCs for unsafe care and neglect, but rarely visits CILAs to check on the most vulnerable. The Department of Human Services continues to ignore the abuse and the neglect in CILAs, even though numerous laws have been passed to protect those residents. One of these required CILA providers to document each time the home contacted emergency help, police, ambulance, etc. In a recent audit by Auditor Frank Montino, he found that frequently agencies did not report these incidents as DHS could not determine whether the word emergency meant. They're laying on a table at DHS and no one goes through and reviews them at all. It seems like common sense. If there's a facility getting dozens of emergency calls, DHS or somebody should check into it. When a provider like the one in Aviston that I reported on several years ago had repeated calls to the police, it was very obvious the provider was not able to provide safe care needed for those individuals living in that home. For months, even though the police contacted DHS, and I reported this several times to DHS, nothing was done. When one of the residents sexually assaulted two other residents, finally DHS moved that individual. What is DHS doing to safeguard the other residents wherever they've moved him? The Silos rarely have announced visits, whereas the SODCs frequently have unannounced visits by Illinois Department of Public Health and Equip for Equality. The Silos are regulated under BALC, not IDBPH. Other DHS agencies, including the Independent Service Coordinators, join BALC in monitoring oversight of the SILA program. DHS has these licensing agencies have the right to unannounced visits in the homes. This rarely happens. In fact, most residents of the Silos frequently tell their family, the state is coming, as the surveyors let the providers know that they'll be there in a few weeks to check on them. Often the visits do not include inspections, but they only go through a little paperwork there. In a SILA, frequently there is one person working and providers self-police. The good providers turn into bad actors. But the SILAs who are there only to make a profit often hide abuse and neglect, and the residents pay the price. The nonverbal residents have no voice and no one looking out for them. Without DHS acknowledging their lack of oversight, the tragic abuse that happens at SILAs and SODCs because of this lack of oversight. These tragedies of abuse will continue to be allowed to occur with no responses. I am glad to help fight abuse everywhere, and it should be stopped. It seems strange that we don't follow up on our small SILAs. Our focus should be on what is best for every resident in a SILA or an SODC, for their individual care, not the wishes of the state or federal government or organizations who have vested interest that do not focus on the individual's needs. Until DHS takes oversight over the SILAs seriously, there will be continued abuse, neglect in these homes that leave individuals open to abuse, neglect. I will now introduce my colleague from Dixon, State Representative Brad Fritz.
Thank you, Representative. It is so great to be with you, everyone. I'm State Representative Brad Fritz. I represent the 74th District, which includes parts of Lee, DeKalb, Ogle, Whiteside, and LaSalle counties. One of our state centers for individuals with developmental disabilities, Mabley Developmental Center, is located in my district in Dixon. Unfortunately, Mabley's been rife with issues of utter mismanagement for years. Numerous cases of abuse and neglect have been reported at this facility that is supposed to care and protect for Illinois' most vulnerable with developmental disabilities. Makes me sick to say it, but here are just a handful of recent examples. On September 27, 2020, a Mabley mental health technician was charged with aggravated battery, official misconduct, and abuse of a long-term health care facility resident for throwing a resident onto a toilet. On June 22, 2022, a mental health technician punched a resident, and was charged with aggravated battery, official misconduct. Around the same time, another mental health technician broke the nose of another resident with a profound intellectual disability and was charged with 2 counts of aggravated battery and 1 count of official misconduct. In October 2023, the department found Mabley staff did not respond correctly to a bacterial outbreak. The department also found that a nonverbal patient was abused with bruises to their groin and pelvic area as if, and I quote, they had been kicked in the groin repeatedly. Frankly, I'm sick to my stomach to hear about these incidents. And these are just a few of the horrific examples of abuse and neglect that patients have experienced at Mabley. Imagine how many more individuals will not have their stories told because they went unreported. Many residents at these facilities are nonverbal or have a difficult time communicating what is happening to them. Without proper oversight from our state agencies, those individuals never receive the justice for the abuse they endured, or unfortunately, there are those who may continue to be abused as we speak today. As my colleague Representative Meyer discussed, this is a widespread issue. Mabley is just one of 7 facilities in our state. Unfortunately, our governor is more worried about running for president than running his own state agencies. While he's off in Mexico, the federal government had to step in and address this issue for him. President Trump is doing our governor's job for him. This has been an issue for a long time, yet whistleblowers continue to be silenced and the cycle of abuse continues. My office has worked with multiple constituents who had concerns about Mabley. We did our due diligence and brought these issues to Governor Pritzker's department. Instead of doing anything about these complaints, they were further ignored and brushed under the rug. In fact, our caucus has been trying to step up and fix these issues for years. Despite all the bills that we have filed to increase oversight and hold abusers accountable, it seems that Illinois Democrats have no interest in addressing these issues because none of these bills are moving through the legislative process. It is long past time for Governor Pritzker to get off his jet, roll up his sleeves, and get to work here in Illinois instead of campaigning in swing states, funding Supreme Court races in Wisconsin, or chasing after CNN and MSNBC for a crumb of national political attention. His agencies, which he is supposed to take full responsibility for, are failing the people of Illinois. They are allowing the most vulnerable to be abused and neglected over and over again. I want to thank President Trump and the United States Department of Justice for finally taking action. They should have never had to step in, but I appreciate them showing what true leadership looks like and stepping up to the plate to take care of our most vulnerable. Illinoisans deserve a true leader who will stand up for the most vulnerable, not a governor who leaves his mismanaged agencies to fend for themselves while he chases his own selfish ambitions. Thank you for your time. We're happy to take any questions.
Representative Fritz, actually, something that you just said was interesting. We were talking about President Trump having to step in, obviously, with the DOJ investigation. There's obviously been an ongoing threat from the federal government that they're going to deprive the state of Illinois of federal funding in a lot of different realms. I mean, they just mentioned cuts to health and human services functions nationally, including in Illinois. And at the same time, the Auditor General in Illinois had issued this report on DHS, how many of these SODCs, many of these DHS centers, they just don't have enough employees. They've had to the states had to pay excessive overtime, and that even goes to their inspector general's function. So I guess while the Trump administration has initiated this investigation, do you think that those efforts can be undercut by the fact that, by the threat of federal funding being deprived by the state, which is something that Governor Pritzker, the Pritzker administration really depends a lot on?
Well, let me first answer by saying I think that misses part of the point that we've tried to express here today, Jeremy.
Okay.
One of the biggest issues that we've had is we now have 6 years under this administration, and we have core
functional agencies, DHS, DCFS, that have had persistent problems, regardless of what's happened over the last 2.5 months in DC. Regardless. And to date, these problems continue to get worse. And each one of us in our district office hears from parents and family members of folks that are confined to these facilities. And what do they hear from the administration? Zero. When is the last time you heard the governor say, we've got a disaster in DCFS, we're going to step up and fix it, and no child is going to be harmed going forward? When is the last time the governor has visited a Scylla to see what the conditions that these people live in? It doesn't occur. He doesn't put attention on the most vulnerable members of our society, and that's regardless of what's happening in DC. Every Democrat upstairs would rather have you asking the question of, what about funding from DC? What about? They continue to mismanage the agencies that we have in this state, and it's evidenced by the fact that our budget, when I got here in 2018, was $39 billion. Today, we're considering a budget for $54 billion, a $15 billion increase per year over a very quick 6-year cycle. Go ahead.
No, sorry, I didn't mean to.
Jeremy, please.
No. You had also mentioned, like, actually for you, Representative, when you started the press conference, you mentioned Secretary of State. What are the issues going on?
So
there?
we
You
are,
gotta talk about
we are running into a significant issue right now with licensure delays and man hours. Seniors are calling each of our offices with the inability to be able to get time in order to get their driver's license passed, as well as truckers and CDL processed. So we're running into a big issue right now. While I appreciate some of the work the Secretary has done, we need to step up and do better by the people, because that is the one thing that most every Illinoisan interacts with, and we got to get that right each and every time.
Is that a new problem?
More recent, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Being here, of course, it's one way to elevate this issue, but why aren't you guys knocking down the governor's office door right now?
Is he in town?
He's in town.
He's in town today, right? So the challenge that we have had is none of our bills are moving forward that we've introduced to solve this problem. We call on the governor all the time. He has spent the last half a year traipsing elsewhere, like my representative peer said, talking in states that are prominent in the next election cycle and wanting to be seen there. It's on the governor. It's his unit of government, and he's failing. What we're trying to do is get attention on the matter.
But wouldn't it be better to pursue this with the governor's office as well? I mean, again, why aren't you guys knocking down the governor's office door, or even talking to, some of like the deputy governors
Yeah.
or whatever? What have those conversations been like? If you have had them?
I have the director's cell numbers. I talk to them weekly. I give them updates. Going back to your information on hiring, I've had bills out there to straighten it. We have investigations going on that we're paying employees 14 months not to work while the investigation sits on a desk in Springfield. We have to hire a temporary worker to come in there to fill that. We have to pay overtime. If we could get these investigations done quickly, we could straighten that out. We would save the state millions of dollars in overtime. Who do you think helped push that audit to get it going, to show what's going on? I've had the bills out there to go back to hiring people the way we used to, on site. The way we hire a person now, we let them send it in online. We go through, we check everything out. 2 to 3 months later, they've probably got a job. If they don't, they finally come in to report for work. We find out somebody else has filled that out because we've never met them. They can't even read or write. Now we're 3 months away from hiring again. If we could see them for that interview on the first day, make sure the person that we're interviewing has the abilities, has the ability to lift the client, we can move forward. We won't do that. The state of Illinois won't do that. I call them weekends, holidays. I call the directors. It's not that we're not trying. It sometimes seems that because we try so hard, they want to make sure we don't do it. The bills have been there to correct a lot of this. The backs have been turned. A month ago, one of the Scylla residents that was living in the Scylla couldn't take care of him, had been in solitary confinement in a jail for 4 months. Moved to Choate for 3 months after that. Then they decided they wanted him out of there, and it appeared they changed his IQ and upped it by 10 points and said he's fine, so they took him back to the jail. He had nowhere to go. The jail found a relative to take him. They dropped him off in St. Louis. Relative sent him back. Nowhere to go. I'm here in Springfield, and I get the call. We're trying to get him in. We got a court order. A judge did a court order to admit him to Murray Center, and DHS would not honor it. Well, we're working on it. They would not honor it. 2 days we worked on that, trying to get him in there. He took off on foot. We had to call Mount Vernon Police Department and the state police because he's running along the interstate. We're afraid he'd jump the fence and get hit. That's how DHS was working on it, letting him run along an interstate, trying to find help. That's not the way it should be done. I made those calls before, and I made them to directors. That's not the way to do business. These individuals deserve far better than that. Far better than that.
Hey, Rep, actually a follow-up question for you. I remember like a year or two, it's relatively recent, in the last year, 2 years, we've asked the governor about, why is there a staff shortage in these DHS facilities? And I remember one of his responses was something to the effect of, well, that it's just, basically in so many words, it's just not a job that you can just give to anyone. I mean, it takes a special kind of person to work in these facilities, but I mean, as far as like kind of what you're saying about people applying online, have you got any sense that the standards have been lowered or anything like that? Or have you heard any? Because they're so desperate to hire people, obviously.
How can you know if the standards are lowered until you meet that person? We need that initial meet. We need to take 3 months out of that time frame for hiring and then move forward with it. Then do the background checks. We're doing this all backwards. I don't know who decided how to do this program, but it changed several years ago, and our employment has gotten far worse because of that.
The stories you're sharing are gut-wrenching. Where are your Democrat colleagues who, typically want to talk about protecting the children and families and the working class? Where are they in this conversation?
I would hope they would step up and go back and look at the bills that I've submitted the last 12 years and say, hey, this would have saved lives. This would have made a difference. Those two people, the one sexually assaulted and the one raped, their lives will never be the same.
But you guys know the cards are stacked against you. Again, to the question of why you're not knocking down the doors of the governor's office, why aren't you guys knocking down the door of the speaker's office demanding that they do something about this? Hundreds of kids dead, not being reported, thousands being abused. I mean, guys, this is...
It's heart-wrenching on all counts. And if you look at what our representatives have done, and Representative Reich has done more than anybody with DCFS, and we keep trying, but the cards are stacked against us. We're out there asking to have bills moved. We can't get them moved.
And Greg, the other thing is, you've been here, you have seen how utterly dismissive the peers on the other side of the aisle have been when we try to raise issues, because we're just complainers. We're not here to solve the problem. We're not going to be taken seriously. And they have a political narrative that they need to satisfy. What we continue to see, and I would encourage you to independently look at the bills that we just passed last night and those that we're going to consider for the rest of the week. We continue to see more and onerous little feather rules that are out there. I go back to this administration needs to step up and protect the most vulnerable. And are there Democrats that see this? Absolutely. Are they moving forward on it? I haven't seen much of anything that does accomplish that. Every time we've seen Leader McCombie bring up the Knight-Silas Act and protecting DCF workers, she gets dismissed. She's pushed out like a rabble-rouser. We're trying to do the right thing by the frontline employees, and we can't get traction on that. So we're here. We're here talking and hoping that the people of the state of Illinois can hear the narrative, continue to put pressure on our Democratic colleagues across the aisle, and move forward.
Do you feel that this is politics getting in the way of taking care of things? Because, if they give a Republican bill that might help solve this issue or something, it gives the Republicans,
Yeah.
rights, and the Democrats...
Unfortunately, it gives them a win, right?
Or is it also the Democrats not wanting to tarnish the governor?
Greg, we can look, total change of subject on this, but I'll give you a perfect example. We looked last year at the driver licensing bill that I introduced to try to help seniors in the state of Illinois. And what did we do? We saw it pass committee. We saw wide acceptance. We saw near 50 co-sponsors in the House to get it done. Senator DeWitt had very similar results. And we saw a brick put on that because of how damn successful the idea was and how it answered the constituents' questions. We had a brick put on it, and what did we see? Before session started this year, we saw miraculously the Secretary of State come out with a strikingly similar bill, hand it off to a Democrat. Now, I hope the problem gets solved. Ultimately, I hope. But to answer your question, yes, it's politics before doing what the Illinois people need to have done. And we see it consistently. We have had a number of representatives, and I don't want to put them on the record here because I'll leave it up to them, who have had very similar situations where we have had Democrat measures move instead of Republican when it's a great, widely accepted idea of things that need to be improved. We're not here complaining. We're here trying to point out that, guys, there is a business of the people of state of Illinois that is getting ignored because people across the aisle would much rather have you focused on what's happening in DC that they can't impact in the least. But let's ignore their ignoring of the Illinois' most vulnerable. So with that, I would conclude. Thank you all for being here today. Appreciate it.